Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Mac, and today we're talking about the state of Elemental Shaman going into the 12.1 patch. It's been roughly 36 days since Blizzard publicly acknowledged Elemental Shaman is a specialization in their video game. And normally, that's probably a safe time to start getting worried. But I've been testing and going through PTR logs, and I'm about to say something that I wouldn't have said a month ago. I think we're in a decent spot. And the thing that got us here was kind of the thing that I thought was going to ruin the spec with the Ascendance Nerf, but let's get into it. Over the last 2 weeks of PTR testing, I took a look at the data and it doesn't look too bad right now. As it stands right now in Mythic Plus, we're sitting in the top third of all DPS specs, and in Raid, we're pretty much dead middle of the pack, with both of those being just generalizations across the board. Now, I know middle of the pack isn't exactly exciting, and obviously we would all love to be higher than that, but somebody has to be in the middle, and that's just how a list works. Every new season, a pile of specs falls around there, and they're not in crisis, it's just where tuning happened to end up. And I would much rather be sitting in the middle of all of the classes than sitting at the bottom and looking up at all the ones having fun. So yeah, middle of the pack, can't really complain. But the number I really care about is Mythic Plus. Being in the top third of all DPS classes moving into a season is a pretty good spot to be sitting, and it's a whole lot better than where we were this season. So let's talk about how we got here, because on paper, those patch notes looked pretty rough. They absolutely gutted Ascendance, and along with it, our overloads. My gut reaction reading that was that we were cooked because our entire class was built around that one button. But what they did to compensate that was shift our damage out of Ascendance into our baseline abilities. They pulled it out of our 2-minute button and shoved it into the buttons that you just hit every single global. And Blizzard said this straight up in the notes. The goal was to spread damage into your spells to make output more consistent, while Ascendance still gives some sort of meaningful spike. And credit where it's due, they did a pretty damn good job. We do lose real power during Ascendance, that part is noticeable and I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but the burst is still pretty good. And more importantly, the sustain is so much better, and we are nowhere near as Ascendance reliant as we used to be. But why does that matter, and why am I excited about it? Think about where we've been sitting this season. Our whole identity was hold everything, press one big button, put up one huge number for 15 seconds, and then go back to being a wet noodle until that button comes back. Meanwhile, a DK or a DH is just doing damage, all the time, every pull. So in a fight where you only get one Ascendance, or worse, a pull where you don't even have Ascendance ready, we were barely considered a DPS spec. And I don't want you to just take my word for it, take a look for yourself. These are some of the highest keys timed this season. Not my keys, the best Elemental Shaman players in the world, in the best groups, doing everything right. Look at where Elemental was sitting. Anywhere from 20 to 50,000 damage behind the other DPS in the key. That is not just a bad pull or an off night. That is our ceiling against everybody else's ceiling. Best case in Season 1, you were second DPS in the group. But most of the time, 99% of the time, you were bottom DPS in that key, and there was nothing you could do about it. You could play the spec absolutely perfectly and still lose out to a mid-meta spec. And it seems like that's the thing these changes are going after. Now we're no longer living or dying by a single 2-minute cooldown, or 3-minute cooldown. The floor came up, and that is the whole story of this patch for us. Now, I'm not going to sit here and promise you that we're going to be topping the meters in Season 2 because I don't know that. But for the first time this expansion, I think it's at least possible to find ourselves at the top of the meter again, which is more than I could have said a month ago. And I'll be straight about the trade though. The ceiling does come down. It's a bit flatter now, more consistent, less explosive, but it still feels super impactful when you hit your buttons. I'll take that trade because ultimately I think it's going to help us, but you should know it is a trade. Now, real quick before I get into the tier set, we're looking like we're going to be Farseer for most content. And learning a new hero tree week 1 of the season is a great way to make you feel like you've never played this game before. So, if you're planning on making the swap over to Farseer and want a hand with it, I offer elemental coaching over on Patreon. Links in the description below if you're interested. Alright, with that beautiful segue out of the way, let's go ahead and continue with the tier set. The 2-piece is super simple. Earthquake, Earth Shock, Elemental Blast, all that damage is up 25%. Nothing to think about, it just happens. The 4-piece, however, is where it gets interesting. When Stormkeeper or Ascendance fades, your next 2 Lightning Bolts, Chain Lightnings, or Lava Bursts do 25% more damage, and each one of them makes your next spender, being Earthquake, Earth Shock, or Elemental Blast, cost 0 Maelstrom. Free spenders, sounds great, and it is great, but there's a catch. There's 2 separate buffs happening here. The first one is your filler buff. That's your extra 25% damage on the filler, and right now it stacks up to 4. When you cast a filler and eat one of those stacks, you then get a second buff, which is your free spender buff. The difficulty here is that the second buff does not stack. So if you go filler spell, spender, that second filler overwrites your free spender buff that you just got, and you pretty much just threw one of them in the trash. You have to instead go filler, spender, every single time your tier set procs. Right now, in Season 1, our rotation is pretty much C button, press button. This new tier set, however, locks you into a pattern and asks you to execute it perfectly. Now, it's not super complicated, and I'm not going to pretend like it's some deep skill expression thing, but it does change how the spec is played, and ultimately, that's kind of what I want out of a tier set. Give me something that affects my gameplay over just a set that quietly adds damage to a spell I was already pressing. We've all been playing the same rotation for a long time now, and this shakes it up a little and keeps the spec from feeling stagnant going into a new season. So it's honestly a pretty cool tier set. We're just going to have to get used to the ebb and flow of it. But one thing I do want to flag, the 2-piece buffing Earthquake by 25% would mean a lot more if Earthquake wasn't just a stationary puddle with the hitbox of a dinner plate while your tank drags the pack across the room, but I've talked about that enough. Next up is Hero Talents, and this one is pretty simple. Farseer is likely going to be meta if the numbers stay where they are right now. Tempest direct damage got nerfed by 20%, plus the Chain Lightning changes and the Overload nerfs hurt Stormbringer a lot more than it hurt Farseer. Farseer is also more mobile and simpler because you don't have Tempest and Stormkeeper interactions constantly shuffling your priority around. But here's the part that's actually interesting and the reason I'm not writing Stormbringer off completely yet. Go back to how the 4-piece works. It procs when Stormkeeper fades. In Stormbringer, your Tempest procs hand you Stormkeeper stacks. You're not just getting Stormkeeper when you press the button, you're also getting it way more frequently from your Tempest procs. Tempest means more Stormkeeper procs, and more Stormkeeper procs means more tier set procs. So Stormbringer is going to get way more out of this tier set than Farseer is going to get. Is it enough to close the gap? I don't know, that's a sim question, I'm not the guy for that. My read of today right now is still Farseer for Raiden keys, and that's what I'm going to be practicing. But keep an eye on Stormbringer once this patch goes live, because that interaction is real and nobody seems to have had a proper crack at it yet. This season was a Stormbringer season, next season's looking like the flip side to me. Just don't be shocked if it's closer than most people expect. So what do you do with all of this information? If you've been playing Stormbringer all season, which most of us have been, go respec on live and start building that Farseer muscle memory now. I'd also get your UI sorted out before the patch instead of after because you want to hit the ground running. This tier set lives or dies by proper buff tracking. You need to see your filler stacks and you need to see whether or not your free spender is up at a glance without going to look for it. Get your cooldown manager set up now while there is no pressure on you to do so. And if you want a suggestion, Ellesmere UI is fantastic. I've been very happy with it. I might do a video on that at some point, I don't know yet. Let me know if you're interested. And if you don't play Elemental at all, this is probably the best time to pick it up in a while. The patch makes it much less reliant on cooldowns, and Farseer is just the easier and more mobile of the two trees. The version of Elemental that punished you for missing the perfect 2-minute setup is not gone, but heavily diminished. And I would also plan on this setup right now being roughly what ships. Everything points to August 11th or 18th, and we haven't been touched in over a month. Would I like to see more patch notes before then? Absolutely, I would love a couple more passes on us. The top of my list would be that tier set buff stacking to 2 charges instead of 1, just to be a little bit more forgiving when you're not perfect. And then my usual Earthquake fix that we've been asking for long enough and I've made peace with it's never happening. But if none of that happens and this is what we get, I'm not going to be distraught about it. To wrap it all up, Ascendance got hit hard, our baseline damage got a lot better, and the spec seems to have come out healthier because of it. And overall, I think that's a pretty decent spot to be in. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and drop a like, it really does help the channel out a lot, and if you want more Elemental or general WoW content, hit subscribe so you don't miss anything. Also, I've been streaming over on Twitch every now and again, so if you want to hang out, ask questions, or just watch while I do Raider Keys, feel free to stop by. And if you want to support the channel a bit more directly, I've got a Patreon linked below where I offer coaching and additional content, along with a Discord where you can talk about the spec, ask questions, or just hang out with the community. But yeah, that's all I got for this one, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I will see you in the next one.